to look at some numbers about why Aboriginal women in prison have increased over the most recent time period. So first off, we're going to start with some scene setting. The first slide here shows the trend in the number of Aboriginal women in custody. That's just adult women, not girls, from March 2013 to March 2021. It shows an increase over the 8-year period of about 60 Aboriginal women, or 29%. By way of comparison, over the same 8-year period, non-Aboriginal women in prison have also increased about 19%. In terms of overrepresentation, you can see that at the start of the period in 2013, Aboriginal women made up approximately 29.3% of the female population. But now in 2021, we're approaching almost 32% of the total female population. So overrepresentation is increasing. In fact, in 2019, Aboriginal women were about 16 times more likely to be in prison than non-Aboriginal women. Just to give you an idea of where we're going today, first we're going to look at prison volumes in terms of both sentenced and remand. Then we're going to unpack the offence types, look at legal actions at the front end, and then look at how the criminal justice system deals with Aboriginal women in terms of bail decisions and sentencing outcomes. So to start with, let's look at the trends in prison volumes again. So here's our first slide. At this time, so this is showing a 29% increase in Aboriginal women in prison. We can look at this slide more as a timeline now. So approximately 8 years ago, in 2014, we had the revision of the Bail Act. This new Bail Act was meant to streamline the bail system, but what resulted was less Aboriginal women being remanded in the months that followed. But this trend was short-lived, when even 12 months later, the Bail Act was amended and the show cause amendment was introduced. Boxer has previously done some work and showed that this particular amendment had an impact on Aboriginal people's access to bail and increased the remand rate across the board. And this was particularly felt by Aboriginal people. In more recent times, we've had the 2018 sentencing reforms, which aim to move people to more community-based orders rather than custodial sentences. And then finally, the last dip, we can see the impact of COVID over the last 18 months and all the criminal justice responses to the pandemic. So we know that the prison population is comprised of both the remand population and the sentenced prisoner population. We can see that the number of Aboriginal women in the sentenced custody is larger than those on remand. However, the gap between these two has almost disappeared in recent months. We can see that there is the increase is much sharper for the remand population over this 8-year time period, up 50% since 2013, and an additional 43 Aboriginal women compared to a 14% increase in the sentenced prisoner population, an additional 17 Aboriginal women. So if we look at what is contributing to the increase overall over the last 8 years, we can see that almost 3/4 is being driven by the remand population, 71.7%. As a comparison for all Aboriginal prisoners, both men and women, the split here is more 50-50. 53% sentence, 47% remand. Okay, so just to give a quick recap, we've seen a 29% increase in Aboriginal women in prison since 2013, and most of this has been driven by the remand population. So lots of interesting information can be gained from the types of offences Aboriginal women are coming into prison for. I will now show this separately for the sentenced and the remand population because this profile is a little bit different for the two sentence types. So this first chart shows the nature of offences that Aboriginal women are in remand for. You can see that the biggest contributors are assault, both domestic and non-domestic assault, but also, as I'm going to highlight in this dark purple colour, violent offences. So we can see that 56% of Aboriginal women are on remand for a violent offence, or 24% are on remand for a property offence, such as break and enter, theft or fraud. This second graph is also showing which offences have increased the most over this 8-year period. In other words, which offences are contributing to an increase in the remand population. And as you can see again, violent offences are really dominating the increase. We have seen huge increases in assault, up 37 prisoners. And in fact, as you can see again by the dark purple colour, all of the increase we have seen in the remand numbers for Aboriginal women are for violent offences. So I'm quickly just going to show a similar graph for sentenced prisoners. So the offence profile looks similar here, except for the top category, which is your justice procedure offences, which includes breaches of sentencing order, including parole violations and breaching community sentences. Once again, I'll highlight the violent offences, again in dark purple. We can see that violent offences are contributing less to the sentenced prisoner population, 42% compared to 56% we saw on the previous slide for the remand population. So once again, if we look at the increase in this second chart, we can see that breaches, sentencing and parole orders contribute to the largest increase, an additional 12 Aboriginal women in the sentenced population. So just to quickly sum up, we've looked at the impact of offences and seen the importance of violent offences, particularly driving the remand population. In 2013, violent offences accounted for 23% of the female Aboriginal population. In 2021, violent offences accounted for more than half of the total Aboriginal female population. An additional 53 violent offenders. This trend is much more prevalent in the remand population and less so in the sentenced prisoner population. Now we're going to look at what matters coming into the criminal justice system and how this has changed. As you might expect to see from the increase in custody volumes, there has also been an increase in the front-end court appearances for Aboriginal women. So this first chart shows a 40% increase in the number of Aboriginal women appearing in court since 2013, an additional 2,101 appearances. The second chart here shows the increase in court volumes by offence type. The largest increases are for justice procedure offences, up 51% over 8 years, driving offences up 46%, and drug offences up 87%. Interestingly, however, these types of offences showing the biggest increases aren't those types of offences that are likely to lead to a custodial penalty, possibly explaining why we are seeing less of an increase in the sentenced prison population for Aboriginal women and more of an increase in remand numbers. So to quickly sum up again, we've seen a big increase in court volumes for Aboriginal women, but mainly for offences that are not likely to result in a custodial penalty, such as driving and using and possessing drugs. We now move on to look at the impact of bail decisions and breaches. This first chart shows the number and proportion of Aboriginal women refused bail at their first court appearance over the last 8 years. This chart shows that there has been a 65% increase in the number of Aboriginal women refused bail since 2013, an additional 258 women. Interestingly, while the number of bail refused has significantly increased, the proportion bail refused has remained relatively stable, ranging from 11 to 14%. So what is driving the increase in bail refusals? Well, most of the increase is from the changes we saw on the previous slide, that is more Aboriginal women appearing in court. The next chart shows the impact of bail breaches and bail revocations. It shows a 90% increase in the number of Aboriginal women having a breach of bail established in court. This is the blue bar. The orange bar shows the number of these breaches that resulted in bail being revoked. That is when someone is remanded back into custody. We can see that these breaches that result in bail revocation are up 29% over the same time period. This is interesting to consider as this is a less obvious way Aboriginal women enter custody between being charged and having their matter finalised in court. The bottom chart on this slide shows in more detail the types of bail conditions being breached by Aboriginal women. The orange bar is the current time period, the 12 months to March 2021, and the blue bar is the 12 months to March 2017, so 5 years ago. We can see that the number of Aboriginal women having breached their bail for committing a further offence is up 53% over the last 5 years, an additional 71 women. The main technical types of breaches being reported for Aboriginal women are reporting, curfew and the residence conditions. The biggest increase was for the curfew condition, up 165% over the last 5 years. So lastly, I'm going to talk about sentencing. So the first chart here shows a trend in Aboriginal women sentenced to custody by the courts. You can see that the numbers, the orange bar, were going up until COVID, which has led to a recent decline. Prior to March 2020, the number of Aboriginal women sentenced to custody was up 44% from 2013. However, when we add in the 2021 number, this is just above the 2013 levels. So we're only seeing a 6% increase over the total 8-year period. The blue bar on this chart shows the proportion of Aboriginal women sentenced to prison. Interestingly, this shows a 26% increase in the imprisonment rate. However, as COVID seems to have had an impact here, prior to March 2021, the imprisonment rate was actually relatively stable. The bottom chart here shows that neither the average length of time in prison for Aboriginal women or the average sentence length imposed by the courts has changed, with both these remaining stable over the last 8 years. So overall, this slide seems to show that any increase in prison sentences is most likely in line with the increase in court volumes, not an increase in the imprisonment rate for Aboriginal women or the length of time they're being sentenced to prison for. So just to summarise where we've come to, the factors that are driving this 29% increase in Aboriginal women in prison is a big increase in legal action. There has been a 40% increase in Aboriginal women coming in the front door of the criminal justice system. We have also seen an increase in the number of Aboriginal women bail refused, mainly due to an increase in the volume of Aboriginal women appearing in court, as the bail refusal rate has remained relatively stable. We have also seen a big increase in bail breaches, up 90%, and bail breaches that result in the bail being revoked and someone returned to custody, up 29%. Also, another takeaway is the big impact of violent offending. Aboriginal women with a violent offence contributed to all of the increase in the Aboriginal female prison population over the last 8 years. Assault alone is contributing to 3/4 of this increase. Thanks for your time today.